The air in the marshal's office was thick with the scent of stale cigar smoke and oiled leather. It was a smell of finality. Anya stood before the heavy oak desk, her hands clasped behind her back, the worn fabric of her father's coat a thin shield against the room's oppressive authority. Her dog, Fen, a creature of shadow and silence with eyes the color of winter dusk, sat pressed against her leg, his presence a warm, living anchor. He did not growl. He simply watched Marshal Thompson, his gaze as steady and unsettling as his mistress's. "The deed was in your father's name, Anya," the marshal said, his voice a low rumble of dismissal. He leaned back in his creaking chair, the star on his chest catching the weak afternoon light. "And before that, his father's. The law is plain. A woman can't hold title. It's not done." He pushed a small stack of coins across the polished wood. $17. It was an insult dressed as charity. "This is a fair price for the lumber and the lot." "More than fair. You can take a room at the boarding house. Find work with Mrs. Vance at the Mercantile." Anya looked at the coins, then back at the marshal's face. She saw no malice there, only the blunt, unthinking certainty of a man who had never been told he was wrong. She had no words to fight that kind of certainty. Her parents had taught her that some arguments are won not with words, but with hammers and saws and the quiet turning of the seasons. She gave a single, almost imperceptible shake of her head. The marshal sighed, a sound of strained patience. "There's nothing else for you here. The land reverts to the township. That's the end of it." Anya turned without a word and walked out, Fen moving with her in perfect synchrony. The heavy door clicked shut behind them. That was the end of it. The end of the small, clapboard house her father had built, the garden her mother had coaxed from the stubborn soil, the life she had known. But it was not the end of her. She did not go to the boarding house. She went to the shed behind her former home and began to pack. The cart was small, its wheels banded with worn iron. Onto it she loaded the tools of her inheritance, a heavy felling axe, a crosscut saw with teeth sharpened just last week, a spade, a pick, a level, an auger. She packed 2 cast iron pots, a side of bacon wrapped in muslin, a sack of flour, another of beans, and a small tin of her mother's tea. Lastly, she retrieved a heavy, oilskin-wrapped bundle from a loose floorboard beneath the bed where her parents had slept. Inside were the journals. Dozens of them, filled with her father's precise architectural drawings and her mother's elegant script detailing soil composition, wind patterns, and the botany of desperate places. This was her true inheritance, the one no marshal could seize. As she pushed the laden cart toward the edge of town, the late autumn wind carrying the first real bite of the coming winter, she became a spectacle. Illyria Vance came out from the Mercantile, her face a mask of worried sympathy. "Anya, dear, what are you doing? You can't just leave. Where will you go?" "I have a plan," Anya said, her voice quiet, not meant to convince but simply to state a fact. "But the Badlands?" Illyria's gaze drifted past the last houses to the stark, broken country that rolled away to the horizon. "Nothing lives out there but coyotes and desperation. You'll freeze or starve before the thaw." Anya nodded, acknowledging the woman's fear without accepting it. She kept walking. Fen stayed close, his shoulder brushing her knee, a silent promise. Further on, they passed the Croft Ranch. Jedediah Croft sat on his porch, mending a harness, his face a road map of wrinkles carved by 70 years of sun and skepticism. He watched her approach, his pale blue eyes missing nothing. He didn't bother to stand. "Heard the marshal bought you out," he called, his voice raspy. Headed for a shallow grave, girl. That's all you'll find out there. He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. The ground freezes 4 feet deep here. The wind'll peel the skin from your bones. Wait until winter. It was not a threat, but a prophecy. Anya met his gaze and held it for a moment. I will, she said. She pushed the cart past his fence line, the wheels groaning in the dirt ruts. She did not look back. Behind her was a town that saw her as a problem to be managed, an unmarried woman to be pitied or dismissed. Ahead was a landscape that saw her only as another living thing, subject to the same impartial laws of heat and cold, hunger and survival. The thought was strangely comforting. For 2 days she walked, following the thin silver line of a frozen creek deeper into the broken land. Fen ranged ahead, his dark form a moving piece of the landscape, always returning to check on her. The world grew quiet, stripped of human voices, filled only with the cry of the wind and the crunch of her boots on the hardening earth. She was looking for a place she had only ever seen in a drawing, a location her father had marked on a hand-drawn map in his 3rd journal. A south-facing coulee, protected from the north wind by a limestone bluff. The creek bends here, creating a deep pool that will freeze solid. Soil is dense clay mixed with loam, ideal for thermal banking. On the evening of the 2nd day, she found it. A gentle scoop carved out of the prairie, a high wall of rock at its back, the creek glittering like a shard of glass at its feet. It felt right. The air was stiller here. The silence felt like a presence, not an absence. She stopped, letting the handles of the cart fall from her raw hands. Fen came and sat beside her, looking out at their new home. She made a simple camp, a lean-to against the rock face. She built a small fire, fed it sparingly with scavenged deadfall, and cooked a thin gruel of flour and water. As the stars emerged, a brilliant cold spray across the black sky, she unwrapped the journals. By the flickering light of the fire, she opened the one marked Volume 7, Subterranean Thermal Regulation and Permafrost Construction. Her father's familiar script filled the page. The earth is a blanket, he had written. The cold is a wall. Most see winter as an enemy to be fought, but it can be a tool. It can be the very stone from which you build your house. Anya traced the words with a finger, the paper cool beneath her touch. The wind moaned over the top of the coulee, a distant, lonely sound. She was not lonely. She had work to do. The next morning she began to dig. The spot she chose was in the center of the coulee, a flat, protected space about 50 feet from the creek. The first few inches of topsoil were loose, but then her shovel struck the hard-pan clay with a dull thud. She switched to the pickaxe, its weight jarring her arms and shoulders with every swing. The rhythm of the work took over. The sharp crack of the pick, the scrape of the shovel, the thud of earth tossed onto a growing pile. It was grueling, monotonous labor. Her hands, soft from a life spent more with books than with tools, quickly blistered. The blisters broke, bled, and began to form the tougher skin of calluses. Her back ached with a fire she had never known. Each night she collapsed by her fire, every muscle screaming, only to rise before dawn and begin again. Fen would watch her, his head on his paws, a silent, attentive foreman. Sometimes he would dig alongside her for a moment, a gesture of solidarity, before retreating to his watch. She was digging a pit, a perfect rectangle, 12 feet wide and 20 feet long. Day after day, she descended deeper into the earth. The town, the Marshal, Jedediah's dismissive voice, they all faded, replaced by the immediate reality of the pick, the shovel, the stubborn, yielding ground. She was not just digging a hole. She was carving out a space for herself in a world that insisted there was none. She thought of her parents' words, "Measure twice, cut once." Her father's voice, "Patience is the strongest wood." Her mother's. The work became a meditation, a conversation with their memory. After 2 weeks of relentless effort, the pit was 5 feet deep. The walls were straight, the floor level. She stood within it, the wind passing harmlessly over her head. She had created a zone of profound stillness. It was the foundation. Now she needed the walls. She turned her attention to the creek. The ice was already thick, a solid sheet of milky green. In one of her mother's journals, there was a detailed study of lake ice, its tensile strength, its crystalline structure. Clear ice, formed in calm, cold conditions, is strongest. Avoid ice with air pockets or snow inclusions. Anya found the deep pool her father had noted on his map. The ice here was a flawless, transparent slab nearly 2 feet thick. She brought the crosscut saw. It was a 2-man saw, long and flexible with wicked teeth. Using it alone was an exercise in frustration and ingenuity. She chopped a starting hole with the axe, then threaded the saw through. She braced her feet, put her whole body into the motion, and began to cut. The saw sang a high, scraping song as its teeth bit into the ice. It was like sawing through stone. Sweat froze on her forehead despite the bitter cold. Fen whined softly, unused to seeing her struggle so intensely. He nudged her hand, then, as if understanding, he backed away and lay down to watch, a dark shape against the snow-dusted bank. Her first block was a jagged, ugly thing. She learned from it. She learned to score the line first, to let the weight of the saw do the work, to pull, not push. Her second cut was cleaner. By the 10th, she was producing smooth, uniform blocks. Each one was 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 1.5 feet thick. They weighed hundreds of pounds. Getting them out of the water was the next challenge. She fashioned a ramp and used a lever of cottonwood and a length of rope to haul them, gasping and straining, onto the bank. She built a small sled from scavenged wood, and one by one she began to move the blocks from the creek to the pit. Fen, sensing a task he could share, leaned into the rope beside her, his powerful body adding crucial momentum. Together, they dragged the immense, glittering bricks across the frozen ground. She needed 200 of them. The number felt impossible. But she focused only on the next one. Haul it from the water, load it onto the sled, drag it to the pit, return for the next. The days blurred into a single, repeating cycle of intense physical exertion. One afternoon, a rider appeared on the ridge overlooking her coulee. It was Jedediah Croft. He sat on his horse for a long time, a silhouette against the gray sky, watching her wrestle a block of ice into place against the earthen wall of her pit. He was too far away for her to see his expression, but she could feel the weight of his disbelief. He watched for nearly an hour, then turned his horse and rode away without coming closer. He did not return for many weeks. She used a slurry of snow and water as mortar. In the frigid air, it froze almost instantly, cementing the blocks to each other and to the earthen walls. She was lining the pit with solid ice, creating a barrier. The skeptics would have laughed. Building a house of ice to survive the winter. It was the logic of a madwoman. But Anya understood the principle from her parents' journals. The ice, combined with the earth, was not the source of cold. It was insulation from it. It would capture the stable temperature of the deep earth, around 35 degrees Fahrenheit, and hold it, creating a pocket of survivable climate sealed away from the lethal, wind-whipped air outside. As the ice walls rose, another rider appeared. This one was younger, Liam, the blacksmith's apprentice. He was quiet, like her, a young man who spoke more with the steady rhythm of his hammer than with his voice. He rode a shaggy pony and reined it in at the edge of the coulee. He didn't mock. He just watched, his expression one of genuine curiosity. He stayed for half an hour, then nodded once, a small, sharp gesture of acknowledgement, and left. The next day, she found a freshly sharpened axe head resting on a nearby stump, its edge honed to a razor gleam. There was no note. None was needed. With the walls complete, she began the roof. This was the most complex part. She needed beams strong enough to support tons of earth. Over several days, she felled 4 sturdy cottonwood trees, limbed them, and, with Fenn's help, dragged the massive logs to the pit. Getting them into place was a masterpiece of leverage and sheer will. She built a ramp, used rollers, and strained until black spots danced in her vision. Finally, the 4 great beams spanned the ice-walled room. She laid a lattice of smaller branches across them, then covered that with the stiff, frozen hides of 2 deer she had managed to hunt. The final step was the sod. Before the ground had frozen solid, she had spent a week cutting thick squares of prairie sod, the dense root systems holding them together like bricks of earth and grass. She had stacked them nearby. Now, she hauled them, one by one, up a ramp and laid them over the roof structure, packing them tightly together, layering them 3 deep. When she was finished, the structure had all but vanished. It was now just a low, snow-dusted mound in the landscape. A gentle swelling of the earth, with a single stovepipe poking out, and a low, angled tunnel for an entrance. She moved her few possessions inside. The air was still and cold, but it was a dead, windless cold. It felt different. The ice walls glowed with a soft blue-green light, catching the rays of the sun that penetrated the entrance tunnel. It was like living inside a glacier. She installed the small potbelly stove she had salvaged from her parents' shed, running the pipe up through a carefully insulated hole in the roof. When she lit the first fire, the change was immediate. The small stove was remarkably efficient. It did not create a sweltering heat, nor was it meant to. It raised the temperature inside from 35 degrees to a stable and utterly livable 40. The ice walls did not melt. The cold they held absorbed the excess heat at their surface, creating a perfect equilibrium. The air outside could drop to 40 below. The wind could howl like a banshee, and inside it would remain 40 degrees. It was a miracle of thermodynamics. She stood in the center of her subterranean home, the quiet hum of the stove a comforting presence. Fenn curled up on a bed of pine boughs and hides, sighed contentedly, and fell asleep. Anya ran a hand over the smooth, cold surface of an ice block. It felt solid, permanent. She had built it. Against all advice, against all reason, she had taken the harshest elements of this land, the frozen earth, the solid ice, the killing cold, and she had built a home. She was ready. Now, she would wait for winter. The first snows were gentle, dusting the landscape in a thin layer of white. The cold deepened incrementally, a slow tightening of a fist. Anya settled into a routine. She checked her trap lines, tended her small fire, and spent the long, dark evenings reading her parents' journals by the light of a tallow lamp. The ice house performed exactly as the journals had predicted. Outside, the temperature dropped to 10 below, then 20. Inside, the small stove kept the space at a steady, comfortable 40 degrees. The silence within the shelter was absolute, a profound quiet that was broken only by the crackle of the fire and the sound of her own breathing. Fenn was content, sleeping for long hours, waking only to eat or to accompany her outside into the stark, frozen world. One afternoon, the quality of the light changed. A strange, yellowish-gray pallor seeped into the sky from the north. The wind, which had been a constant but predictable force from the west, fell completely silent. The world held its breath. Fen grew restless. He stood at the entrance to the tunnel, his nose twitching, a low, almost inaudible growl rumbling in his chest. Anya went to stand beside him. The air felt heavy, charged with a strange electricity. She had read about this in her mother's journal. Before a great norther, the air stills, the pressure drops, animals become agitated. It is the quiet before the fury. A rider appeared on the ridge, moving fast. It was Jedediah Croft. This time he rode all the way down into the coulee, his breath and the horses pluming in the frigid air. He pulled up a few yards from her earthen mound, his face grim. "A real norther is coming," he said, his voice stripped of its usual mockery. He had the look of a man delivering a verdict. "One you haven't seen before. The sky looks wrong. My bones feel it. This won't be a 2-day blow. It'll last a week, maybe more." He looked at the low mound of her home, the single plume of smoke rising from the pipe. He shook his head, a gesture now more of pity than of scorn. "Whatever that is, it won't be enough. You should come back with me. My house has stood for 50 years. It'll stand through this." It was an offer of truce, an admission that perhaps she wasn't entirely foolish, but it was still rooted in the belief that his way was the only way. "I'll be safe here," Anya said. Her voice was calm, certain. Jedediah stared at her for a long moment, searching her face. He saw no fear, no doubt. He saw only a quiet, unshakable resolve. He grunted. "Have it your way, girl. Don't say I didn't warn you." He wheeled his horse and galloped away, racing the coming storm. Anya watched him go. Then she and Fen retreated into the shelter. She brought in a large stack of firewood, checked the seal on her door, a heavy, hide-covered plank, and added another piece of wood to the stove. Then she waited. The storm did not arrive. It fell. One moment there was quiet. The next, the world was obliterated by a howling whiteness. The sound was immense, a physical weight that pressed down on the roof. It was not the sound of wind, but the sound of the world being torn apart. Through the stovepipe she could hear it, a demonic shriek that went on and on without pause. But inside, there was only the gentle hiss of the fire. The ice walls seemed to absorb the external chaos, rendering it null. The temperature held at 40 degrees. Fen, who had been agitated, settled by the fire, reassured by the profound stillness of their sanctuary. For 3 days the storm raged without ceasing. Anya could not tell day from night. The world outside her shelter had ceased to exist, replaced by a roaring, featureless void. She slept, ate, read, and kept the fire fed. She was sealed in a bubble of calm at the heart of a maelstrom. She felt a deep, quiet sense of vindication. Her parents' theories were not just ink on paper. They were real. They were life. On the 4th day, she was jolted awake by a sound that did not belong. A frantic, desperate pounding on the heavy plank door at the end of the entry tunnel. Fen was instantly on his feet, a deep growl in his chest. Anya quieted him with a hand on his head. Who could possibly be out in this? She unbarred the door and pulled it inward against a wall of packed snow. A figure stumbled in, collapsing into the tunnel, covered head to toe in ice and snow. It was Liam. His face was pale with exhaustion and cold, his eyebrows and beard caked in ice. "Anya," he gasped, his voice hoarse. "Thank God. I wasn't sure I'd find it." She helped him into the main chamber, sat him by the fire, and wrapped him in a heavy fur. She gave him a hot cup of tea, and he drank it greedily, his hands shaking. "The storm. It's worse than anyone imagined," he said after a few moments, his breathing steadying. The wind took the roof off the livery. The snow is drifting to the rooftops. People are in trouble. Jedediah Croft. His main beam cracked. The roof collapsed. He and his wife, they're trapped. Their fire's out. Anya looked at the calm, glowing walls of her shelter. She thought of Jedediah's prophecy. Wait until winter. Winter had come. "Show me," she said. It was not a question. Liam looked at her, then at the howling abyss outside. "We'll never make it. You can't see 5 feet. The wind will knock you down." Anya went to a chest and pulled out a coil of rope and 3 sets of crude snow goggles she had fashioned from leather and slivers of smoked glass, just as a journal had described. "My father wrote about navigating in whiteouts. You don't look at the snow, you feel the wind. It's been from the north for 4 days. It won't change until the storm breaks. We keep it on our right cheek going there and our left coming back. We'll rope ourselves together." Liam stared at her, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. She was not panicking. She was not afraid. She had a plan. They tied the rope around their waists, with Fenn's harness clipped in between them. Anya took the lead, pulling the hide door shut behind them. Stepping out of the shelter was like stepping off a cliff. The force of the wind was staggering, a solid wall of motion and ice particles that scoured any exposed skin. The noise was deafening. Liam was right. Visibility was non-existent. It was like swimming in a sea of milk and razors. But Anya trusted the wind. She turned until she felt its steady, brutal pressure on the side of her face and began to walk, leaning into it, her feet finding purchase in the deep, sculpted drifts. Fenn and Liam followed, trusting her completely. It was a journey through sensory deprivation. There was no up or down, no landscape, only the wind, the rope, and the person in front of them. It took them over an hour to cover the distance that would have taken minutes on a clear day. They found the Croft Ranch buried, only a single corner of the roof and a chimney stack visible above the mountainous drifts. They dug frantically at the snow where Liam thought the door was, their shovels meeting collapsed timbers. They heard a faint cry from within. Working together, they managed to pry open a space in the wreckage. Anya squeezed through, dropping into the frigid, dark interior. Jedediah was huddled in a corner with his wife, Martha, wrapped in every blanket they owned. They were shivering violently, their faces pale and bluish in the gloom. "Came to collect on your warning," Anya said, her voice even. Jedediah looked up, his eyes wide with shock. He saw the girl he had dismissed, the fool who was building a house of ice, standing there like an apparition in the heart of the storm that had just destroyed his world. He had no words. He simply nodded, a broken man. Getting them back was even harder. Martha could barely walk. They half carried, half dragged her, a dead weight between them. Jedediah, humbled and exhausted, followed grimly. The wind seemed to intensify, trying to tear them apart. But Anya was relentless, a fixed point in the chaos, her internal compass locked onto the pressure of the wind. Finally, they stumbled into the relative quiet of her coulee and into the mouth of the tunnel. When Jedediah and Martha Croft stepped into the main chamber of the ice house, they stopped dead. The quiet was the first shock. The absolute stillness after the roaring hell outside was disorienting. The second was the air. It was not warm, but it was not lethally cold. It was breathable, livable. The third was the light. The small lamp cast a soft glow on the walls, which shimmered with an ethereal blue-green luminescence. They were inside a jewel box carved from winter itself. "I'll be damned," Jedediah whispered, his voice cracking. He looked from the walls to the steady plume of smoke rising from the stove, then to Anya, who was already tending to his wife's frostbitten hands. "How?" My parents work, she said simply, packing snow onto Martha's white fingertips. Before anyone could say more, there was another commotion at the door. Liam, who had gone to check the entrance, returned with more refugees. Ilara Vance from the Mercantile, her face streaked with frozen tears, and 2 of her children. Their roof had given way under the weight of the snow. Within the hour, 2 more families arrived, guided by Liam, who had seen their lamps go out. Anya's shelter, the object of pity and scorn, had become the town's only ark. The final arrival came late on the 5th day of the storm. It was Marshal Thompson. He was alone, his face haggard. He did not look at Anya as he entered. He simply found a place along the wall, slumped down, and pulled his hat over his eyes, a man stripped of all authority, reduced to a simple, shivering creature seeking shelter from the cold. For 2 more days they lived together in the glowing ice cavern, 20 people and a dog, packed into a space 20 feet long and 12 feet wide. Anya shared her food, her tea, her blankets. She moved among them, a quiet, calming presence, tending to frostbite, reassuring frightened children. There was a new order in this subterranean world. It was not based on wealth or title or age, but on a simple, profound truth. Her knowledge had saved them. They watched her, their faces filled with a new and unfamiliar respect. Jedediah Croft sat by the stove, staring at the glittering walls, occasionally shaking his head in silent wonder. He had lived on this land for 70 years and had never understood it. This girl, here for less than a season, understood it completely. When the storm finally broke on the 7th day, the silence was as shocking as the noise had been. They emerged from the shelter into a world transformed. The sun shone with blinding intensity on a landscape buried under 10 feet of snow. The sky was a brilliant, painful blue. The world was pristine, beautiful, and utterly devastated. The town of Prosperity was gone, buried under drifts that reshaped the familiar lines of the street into a series of soft, rolling hills. Chimneys poked out like lonely grave markers. The survivors stood in a silent group, looking at the ruin of their lives. Marshal Thompson walked over to Anya. He stood before her, no longer a figure of authority, but just a man. He took off his hat. "This is your land," he said, his voice quiet but clear for all to hear. "I was wrong. I'll see the deed is filed proper. This land and any you care to claim beside it." Anya simply nodded. Jedediah Croft came next. He stopped in front of her and looked her straight in the eye. His own were filled with a difficult, hard-won humility. "You saved us," he said. "Me and Martha. We'd have been dead. All that talk of mine, it was just noise. You listened to the land." He cleared his throat. "I'd be honored if you'd teach me what you know." That was the beginning. In the weeks that followed, the people of the ruined town did not abandon the Badlands. They stayed. They came to Anya's coulee, not with skepticism, but with questions. She did not give speeches or lectures. She unrolled her parents' journals on the small table in her shelter and let the knowledge speak for itself. She showed them the diagrams of thermal mass, the notes on passive solar orientation, the calculations for roof load. They began to rebuild, but they rebuilt differently. With Anya and Liam guiding them, they dug. They built their own pit houses, smaller and simpler than Anya's, but based on the same principles. They learned to cut sod and bank their walls with earth. They learned to see the landscape not as an adversary, but as a partner. The wind was still a danger, but now they knew how to hide from it. The cold was still a threat, but now they knew how to use it as a shield. The town was reborn, not as Prosperity, a name that had always felt like a lie, but as Coulee Creek. Liam was a constant presence at Anya's side. He did not speak of love or the future. He spoke of joinery, of how to brace a roof beam, of the best wood for a door frame. He helped her reinforce her own shelter, their hands often brushing as they worked, their shared labor a quiet conversation that built something stronger than any house. They were two quiet people who understood each other without the need for many words. Their foundation was solid. Years passed. The settlement of Coulee Creek thrived, a testament to resilience and unconventional wisdom. Its unique, earth-sheltered homes were warm in the winter and cool in the summer, a cluster of living mounds that seemed to have grown from the prairie itself. Anya and Liam married in a simple ceremony on the bluff overlooking her home. Their lives intertwined with the seasons, marked by planting and harvest, by the first snow and the spring thaw. They had 2 children, a boy with his father's steady hands and a girl with her mother's observant eyes. Anya became the quiet heart of the community. She was the keeper of the journals, the one people sought out when a new design was needed or when the old wisdom was forgotten. She never held a title, but her authority was absolute, earned in the heart of the great blizzard and reinforced by years of quiet competence. Fen grew old. His muzzle turned gray, his powerful limbs became stiff. He spent most of his days sleeping by the stove in the ice house, which was now more earth than ice, the walls having slowly been replaced by stone and timber over the years, though the principle remained the same. One winter evening, he rested his great head on Anya's lap as she sat reading. His breathing was shallow. She stroked his fur, her fingers remembering the feel of the powerful young dog who had helped her drag blocks of ice from the frozen creek. He gave a soft sigh, a gentle release of breath, and was still. His passing was as quiet and dignified as his life had been. The next day, Anya and Liam buried him on the hill overlooking the coulee, beneath a lone, wind-scoured juniper tree. A simple fieldstone marked the spot. There was no name, just the silent memory of a loyal witness. Decades rolled by. Anya's hair turned the color of snow. Her children grew and had children of their own. She taught them to read the sky, to understand the soil, to listen to the wind. She passed on the knowledge from her parents' journals, adding her own notes in a steady, graceful script. She had walked into the Badlands a dispossessed orphan, and she had become a matriarch, the founder of a new way of life. She died peacefully in her sleep one spring morning, in the home she had built with her own 2 hands. The entire community, 3 generations of people who owed their lives and their homes to her stubborn vision, mourned her passing. They buried her on the hill beside Fen, overlooking the coulee that bore her name. Another 50 years passed. The world outside changed in ways the people of Coulee Creek could barely imagine, but in their sheltered valley, life continued, anchored to the rhythms of the land. The original shelter, Anya's house, was now a monument, preserved by the community, its interior a small museum containing her parents' journals and the simple tools with which she had built her world. A young girl, Anya's great-great-granddaughter, stood on the hill, her hand resting on the weathered stone that marked the grave. The wind, the same eternal wind that had once been an enemy, gently stirred her hair. She traced the letters carved into the stone, worn smooth by a century of snow and sun. They were simple, direct, and true, just like the woman who lay beneath them. Anya Vance, she built a home on the wind. Below, the homes of Coulee Creek were nestled into the earth, smoke curling from their chimneys in the crisp autumn air. They were a testament, carved into the very landscape, that a home was not a matter of law or title, but of wisdom, of courage, and of the unyielding will of a woman who was told she owned nothing, and so chose to build everything.